The General Who Would Not Kneel. The epic true story of Yue Fei, China's greatest hero. The year is 1140. The air hangs heavy with the scent of burnt grass and distant cooking fires. 20 kilometers south of Kaifeng, the ancient capital that once shone like a jewel in the heart of the Middle Kingdom, an army waits in the gathering dusk. General Yue Fei stands at the edge of his command tent, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. He is 37 years old, but his eyes carry the weight of 10,000 battlefields. Behind him, his officers murmur in low voices, reviewing maps by lamplight. Before him stretches the northern plain, where Kaifeng's walls rise like a promise against the horizon. The city is so close. After 10 years of blood and fire, of watching his homeland burn while foreign invaders enslaved his people, the moment of reckoning has arrived. His army has just shattered the Jin dynasty's elite forces at Yancheng, crushing an enemy that outnumbered them 5-1. They have swept through 10 provinces like a righteous wind, and now the old capital lies within striking distance. One final push, one decisive siege, and China could be whole again. But something moves in the darkness beyond the camp perimeter. A rider approaches at desperate speed, his horse frothing with exhaustion. The sentries part, recognizing the imperial courier by the golden medallion hanging from his neck. The messenger dismounts and falls to his knees before Yue Fei, gasping for breath. "General," he says, his voice breaking, "an imperial edict. You are ordered to withdraw immediately and return to the capital." Yue Fei does not move. His face remains impassive, carved from stone. But those who know him see his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Around him, his officers have frozen in shock. Withdraw? Now? With victory days away, the messenger extends the golden medallion, the emperor's personal seal gleaming in the torchlight. It is the first of 12 that will arrive over the next 5 days, each one more urgent than the last, each one demanding his return, each one destroying his life's work piece by piece. This is not a story of victory, not in the way you might expect. This is the story of a man who won every battle, but lost to something far more dangerous than any army. This is the story of Yue Fei, the general who would not kneel to injustice, but would kneel to his emperor, even when that emperor betrayed everything he fought for. To understand how a warrior stands at the gates of triumph only to walk away, to understand how the greatest general of his age ends up in chains, condemned by the very nation he saved, we must go back to the beginning, back to when China was breaking apart, when barbarian horsemen from the north rode down from the steppes like a storm, and when one boy decided that he would rather die standing than live kneeling. This is his story. Chapter 1. The Child of the Bird. The year 1103. The Northern Song dynasty has ruled China for nearly a century and a half, presiding over an empire of unprecedented wealth and culture. Kaifeng is the largest city in the world, home to over 1 million souls. Its markets overflow with silk and porcelain. Its academies nurture poets and painters. Its gardens showcase the refined sensibilities of a civilization that considers itself the center of the world. But far from the capital's splendor, in the dusty farmlands of Tangyin County in Henan Province, life moves to a different rhythm. Here, the great cultural flowering of the Song dynasty is a distant rumor. Here, peasant families like the Yues work the land from dawn to dusk, their backs bent over fields that feed the empire but leave little for themselves. It is spring when Lady Yue goes into labor. Her husband Yue He paces outside their simple dwelling, his calloused hands clenched with worry. This is their first child, and in these times childbirth is a gateway that opens both ways. The midwife has been inside for hours. The sun climbs higher, and then, just as Yue He begins to fear the worst, he hears it. Not the cry of a newborn, but something else entirely. A great bird descends from the clear sky. The farmers working nearby all stop and point. It is unlike any bird they have seen before. Massive and white, its wings spanning wider than a man's outstretched arms. It circles once, twice, and then lands on the roof of the Yue family home, settling there with the gravity of an omen. And in that same moment, from inside the house, comes the wailing of a healthy infant. The midwife emerges, holding the child wrapped in cloth. "A boy," she says, smiling. strong lungs, strong limbs. He will grow tall. Yue He looks at his son, then at the great bird still perched on his roof, and he understands. He names the child Fei, which means to fly. It is both a blessing and a prophecy. This boy will rise above his circumstances. He will soar. But prophecies are double-edged swords. They promise greatness without promising happiness. They promise wings without guaranteeing safe landing. Yue He holds his son and prays that whatever destiny awaits this child, he will have the strength to bear it. Young Yue Fei grows quickly. By the age of 5, he is helping his father in the fields, learning the rhythm of planting and harvest. The work is back-breaking, the kind that ages men before their time, but it builds something in the boy. His small body becomes corded with lean muscle, his hands develop calluses, and perhaps most importantly, he learns what it means to endure. But Yue He has dreams for his son that extend beyond the furrows of their farm. He knows that in the Song dynasty, there is a path for even the poorest boy to rise: the civil service examinations. If a young man can master the Confucian classics, can demonstrate learning and virtue, he can become a scholar official, joining the literati elite that runs the empire. It is the only socially acceptable path to advancement, the only way to trade a life of mud and sweat for one of ink and silk. So every night, after the day's labor is done, after the simple evening meal has been eaten and cleaned away, Yue He teaches his son to read. They sit by lamplight, the father's rough finger tracing characters in the dirt floor, then on salvaged scraps of paper when they can afford them. It is slow, painstaking work, but young Fei proves to have his father's determination. He learns quickly, hungrily. Yet, as the boy's literacy grows, something unexpected happens. When Yue He brings home classical texts borrowed from the village elder, expecting his son to immerse himself in Confucian philosophy, young Fei gravitates instead to different books. He devours the Zhuozhuan, an ancient chronicle of warfare and strategy. He studies Sun Tzu's art of war, memorizing passages about terrain and deception and the psychology of victory. He begs to hear stories of heroes from dynasties past, of generals who defended China against barbarian invasions, of warriors who chose death before dishonor. "Father," he asks one night, his young voice serious beyond his years, "why do we study books about governing when our enemies come with swords?" Often Yue He looks at his son, troubled by the question but unable to answer it. The truth is that the Song dynasty has grown wealthy and cultured precisely because it has chosen to emphasize civil administration over military might. The empire's founder, fearing that powerful generals might threaten the throne, deliberately structured the government to keep the military subordinate to civilian bureaucrats. It is a system that has brought stability, yes, but at a cost. The Song armies are weak, often humiliated by the nomadic tribes to the north and west. "There are different kinds of strength, my son," Yue He finally says. "A scholar's brush can guide a nation. But who will defend the nation while the scholars guide it?" Fei asks. It is a child's question, direct and innocent, but it contains within it the seed of tragedy that will grow throughout Yue Fei's entire life. He sees, even as a boy, the fundamental weakness at the heart of his civilization. The Song dynasty has perfected the art of governance, but forgotten the art of war. And when the storms come, as storms always do, all the poetry and philosophy in the world will not hold back the horsemen from the north. When Yue Fei turns 11, his father arranges for him to study with Zhou Tong, a retired soldier who lives on the outskirts of the village. Zhou Tong is old now, his beard grey and his body bent, but those who remember him from his youth speak of his skill with reverence. He was an archer in the imperial army, they say, who could split a willow branch at 100 paces. He was a spearmaster who once held a bridge single-handedly against a dozen bandits. The first day, Yue Fei presents himself at Zhou Tong's simple dwelling. The old master looks at him with eyes that have seen too much death to be impressed by youthful enthusiasm. "Why do you want to learn the martial arts?" Zhou Tong asks. "To serve my country, master," Fei replies immediately. "To defend the innocent." Zhou Tong grunts. Pretty words. Every boy says them, but most boys want glory. They want to be heroes. They want the world to remember their names. He leans forward, his gaze boring into Fei's. "Real warriors know that glory is a lie. The path I can teach you leads only to pain and sacrifice. Are you prepared for that? Young Fei does not hesitate. I am, Master. Defteravad. We'll see, Jiutong says. We'll see. The training is brutal. Every morning before dawn, Fei rises and runs to Jiutong's home, arriving as the first gray light touches the eastern sky. The old master puts him through exercises that leave him gasping and trembling. He teaches Fei to draw a bow, starting with a light one, and gradually increasing the weight until the boy's back and arms burn with every pull. He drills him in spear techniques, making him practice the same thrust 10,000 times, then 20,000, until the movement becomes as natural as breathing. But Jiutong teaches more than just physical technique. He teaches patience. He teaches observation. He teaches Fei to read the flow of combat like a scholar reads poetry, to see the spaces between the actions where victory lives. Strength fades, Jiutong says during one lesson, watching as Fei practices with a spear. Speed diminishes, but strategy, discipline, the ability to remain calm when death dances at your shoulder. These things separate the warrior who survives from the fool who dies gloriously. Glory is for poets. You must learn to fight like a butcher, efficient and remorseless, if you want to protect anything worth protecting. Years pass. Yue Fei grows tall and powerful, his body shaped by both farm labor and martial training. By the time he reaches his late teens, he can draw a 300-pound bow, a feat that few grown men can match. He has mastered the spear and the sword, the halberd and the staff. But, more importantly, he has absorbed Jiutong's lessons about discipline and strategy. He continues his studies too, refusing to abandon the books his father brought him. He reads the military classics, yes, but also history and philosophy. He wants to understand not just how to fight, but why men fight, what causes nations to rise and fall, what separates a just war from mere slaughter. His father watches this development with mixed feelings. He is proud of his son's capabilities, but he worries. The life of a soldier in the Song dynasty is not prestigious. Scholars look down on military men as crude and ignorant. The pay is poor, the prospects limited. And yet, when Yue He suggests that his son should focus on the civil service examinations, Fei shakes his head. There is no tradition of scholarship in our family, father, Fei says gently. I would be starting from nothing, competing against boys who have studied the classics since birth. But there is another way I can serve, another way I can lift our family and protect our people. The military, Yue He asks, though he already knows the answer. The military, Fei confirms. The empire needs defenders, father, especially now. Because by this time, in 1122, when Yue Fei is 19 years old, the carefully maintained peace of the Song dynasty is beginning to crack. To the north, a new power has risen among the Jurchen tribes. They call themselves the Jin dynasty, and they have already conquered the Liao, another nomadic empire that had plagued the Song for generations. Now, in a moment of terrible short-sightedness, the Song court has allied with the Jin to finish off the Liao, hoping to recover territories lost decades ago. It seems like a good idea. It seems like an opportunity. And so, when the call goes out for soldiers to join the northern campaign, Yue Fei enlists. His father embraces him at the village edge, and Lady Yue weeps. But there is also pride in her tears. Her son is going to serve the empire. He is going to be a soldier. Neither of them can imagine what horror is about to unfold. Neither of them knows that the Jin, once the Liao is destroyed, will turn their full fury on the Song itself. Neither of them understands that Yue Fei is about to witness the greatest catastrophe in Chinese history, an event so traumatic that it will haunt the nation for generations. The young man who walks away from his village in 1122 is idealistic and hopeful. The man who will return from the north is someone else entirely, tempered by fire and loss into something harder and more dangerous. He does not know it yet, but his true war is about to begin. Chapter 2. When the world broke. The northern campaign begins well enough. Yue Fei serves as a common soldier, a spearman in the mass of troops that march toward the contested territories. He performs his duties with the same discipline Zhao Tong instilled in him, and his officers notice. He does not shirk or complain. When orders come, he obeys. When danger looms, he does not flee. But the campaign itself is a disaster. The Song commanders prove to be exactly what the empire's military structure has created. Competent bureaucrats who know nothing of warfare. They issue contradictory orders, position their troops poorly, and fail to coordinate with their Jin allies. It is the Jin armies that do the real fighting, their cavalry sweeping through enemy formations, while the Song troops fumble in their wake. Yue Fei watches this incompetence with growing frustration. He can see the mistakes, the missed opportunities, but he is just a private, voiceless in the hierarchy. All he can do is survive and try to protect his fellow soldiers when the fighting grows fierce. Then, in the midst of the campaign, devastating news arrives from home. His father has died. By law and tradition, Yue Fei must return immediately to observe the mourning period. For 3 years, a son must wear coarse mourning clothes, abstain from celebrations, and honor his deceased parent. In the rigid structure of Song society, this is not optional. It is the foundation of filial piety, the cornerstone of Confucian virtue. So Yue Fei returns home, his brief military career interrupted. He buries his father with what little ceremony they can afford and begins the mourning period. For months, he works the farm with his mother, supporting them both. He does not speak much. The grief is genuine, but there is also anger beneath it. His father was a good man who lived a hard life and died still poor, still unrecognized. What had all his honesty and virtue earned him? A small plot of earth and a simple grave. But the mourning period also gives Yue Fei time to think, to study, to refine his understanding of military strategy. He reads everything he can find about warfare. He practices his martial arts in the quiet hours before dawn. He prepares himself for the day when he can return to service. That day comes sooner than expected. In 1125, the Jin dynasty does what anyone with sense should have predicted. They turn on their Song allies. The wolf has helped them kill the deer, and now the wolf is hungry. The Jin armies come south like a flood. Their cavalry, hardened by generations of steppe warfare, crashes through Song defensive positions with contemptuous ease. They move faster than Song commanders can react, appearing where they are not expected, striking at supply lines and communication routes. The Song armies, already demoralized by years of defeats against the Liao, break and scatter. By 1126, the Jin are at the gates of Kaifeng itself. The news reaches Tangyin County like a thunderclap. The capital is under siege. The emperor is in danger. The entire empire teeters on the brink of collapse. Young men across the central provinces rush to answer the call to defend the homeland, and Yue Fei is among them. His mourning period is not complete, but in a time of national crisis, exceptions are made. He embraces his mother, promises to return, and rides north to join whatever Song forces he can find. What he rides into is chaos. The first siege of Kaifeng lasts for months. The Jin surround the city and demand impossible tribute. Gold, silver, silk, livestock, everything the desperate Song can scrape together. Emperor Huizong, who has spent his reign cultivating art and culture while ignoring the empire's military decay, abdicates in panic, placing the throne on his eldest son, Qinzong. But the new emperor is no better prepared. He oscillates between wanting to fight and wanting to sue for peace, issuing contradictory orders that paralyze his generals. Yue Fei is part of the defense force inside the city, and he fights with desperate determination when the Jin assault the walls. But it is clear to him, as it is clear to anyone with eyes, that the Song court is collapsing from within. Corruption and incompetence have rotted the foundations. The civil bureaucrats who control the military know nothing of warfare. The few competent generals are ignored or undermined. Finally, in February 1126, the Jin agree to withdraw. They have extracted an enormous tribute and obtained promises of more to come. The crisis seems to be over. Emperor Qinzong, believing he has successfully negotiated peace, makes the fatal mistake of relaxing his defenses. The generals who fought so hard to hold Kaifeng are demobilized or sent to other postings. The city's walls are not properly repaired. It is the calm before the apocalypse. By November 1126, the Jin are back. This time they come with 3 massive armies, surrounding Kaifeng completely. And this time, they do not come to negotiate. They come to conquer. The second siege is worse than the first. The city's supplies dwindle. Starvation stalks the streets. Disease spreads through the crowded population. And still, the Song court cannot organize an effective defense. Resources that should go to the soldiers instead disappear into the pockets of corrupt officials. Orders that should mobilize relief forces never arrive, or arrive too late. Yue Fei fights on the walls, his spear dripping with Jin blood. He organizes small bands of soldiers, launches nighttime raids on enemy camps, does everything a junior officer without authority can do. But he knows, with a sick certainty, that it is not enough. They are going to lose. On January 9th, 1127, the gates open. Some say it was treachery from within. Some say the defenders were simply exhausted and starving. Either way, the result is the same. The Jin pour into Kaifeng like a dark tide. What follows is remembered in Chinese history as the Jingkang incident, though incident is far too mild a word for what actually occurs. It is a catastrophe, a trauma so deep that it will scar the Chinese consciousness for centuries. The Jin loot the city systematically, taking everything of value. The imperial treasuries, accumulated over generations, are stripped bare. Artworks, books, ceremonial vessels, the physical manifestations of Song culture, all are bundled up and carted north. The imperial library, containing irreplaceable manuscripts, is seized and dispersed. Even the decorations are pried from the palace walls, but the worst is yet to come. On March 20th, 1127, Emperor Qinzong and his father, the retired Emperor Huizong, are summoned to the Jin camp. There, before their own people, they are forced to strip and dress in the plain clothing of commoners. Their imperial titles are taken from them. They are declared slaves, and then they are taken north. Along with them go almost the entire imperial family. Thousands of officials, tens of thousands of civilians, anyone with skills or learning or beauty that might be useful. They are herded like cattle toward Manchuria, toward captivity and slavery and humiliation beyond words. Many die on the march. Those who survive face fates that official histories struggle to describe. Kaifeng, the greatest city in the world, is left a broken shell. Yue Fei witnesses all of this. He watches the looting, the rapes, the casual brutality of a conquering army that sees the Chinese as subhuman. He watches women and children being led away in chains. He watches old men beaten to death for sport. He watches his civilization collapse in fire and blood, and he cannot stop any of it. There are moments when he thinks of rushing forward, of trying to defend someone, anyone. But he is one man, one spear. His death would accomplish nothing except adding one more corpse to the pile. So he does what soldiers have always done in the face of overwhelming horror. He survives. He keeps his head down, melts into the chaos, makes his way out of the ruined city. He is not the only one. Scattered Song soldiers, leaderless and traumatized, are streaming south. Among them are also officials and noble families who managed to escape the initial roundup. And most importantly, one member of the imperial family has gotten away. Prince Zhaogo, who had been on a diplomatic mission when the city fell. Zhaogo is young, inexperienced, and terrified. But he is also the only surviving Song prince with a claim to the throne. As he flees southward, pursued by Jin cavalry, loyal soldiers and officials rally to him. They proclaim him emperor, continuing the Song dynasty, even though half the empire is now under Jin occupation. He takes the title Emperor Gaozong and establishes a new capital south of the Yangtze River. The northern Song is dead. The southern Song has been born, in blood and ashes. And Yue Fei, 24 years old, his idealism burned away by horror, makes a decision. He will fight. Not for glory, not for advancement, not even for revenge, though the desire for vengeance burns in him like iron in a forge. He will fight because it is the only thing he can do. Because someone must. Because if men like him do not stand between the innocent and the invaders, then everything his father believed in, everything Zhou Tong taught him, everything that makes them human rather than animals, will be lost. He makes his way to the new emperor's court and offers his service. He is accepted, because in these desperate times, the Southern Song needs every capable man it can find. This is when Yue Fei's true story begins, not as a boy with dreams of heroism, but as a man who has seen hell and chosen to walk back into it. Not as a novice soldier, but as a warrior tempered by the greatest disaster his nation has ever known. He has lost his father. Soon he will lose more. But he will gain something too, a purpose that will drive him until his last breath, a mission that will make him legend. The liberation of China, the restoration of the Song, the return of the captive emperors and their people. These are now Yue Fei's gods, and he will serve them with a devotion that will amaze and terrify those who witness it. The boy who wanted to fly has learned to fight, and now the war truly begins. Chapter 3. Forging the Blade. The early years of the Southern Song dynasty are chaos incarnate. Emperor Gaozong is constantly on the move, fleeing from one temporary capital to another as Jin armies probe southward. The empire has lost more than half its territory, including the entire agricultural heartland around the Yellow River. Refugees flood south across the Yangtze in their millions, bringing tales of horror and creating massive humanitarian crises wherever they settle. The new government is desperately trying to establish legitimacy while simultaneously fighting for survival. Warlords and bandits, seeing opportunity in the chaos, carve out their own domains. The Jin have also set up puppet states in the north, trying to create a buffer of compliant Chinese rulers between themselves and the Southern Song. Everything is in flux. Everything is uncertain. Into this maelstrom steps Yue Fei, but he does not step as a general. Not yet. He is still just a soldier, though one with growing recognition for his battlefield competence. What changes his trajectory is not just his martial skill, but something else. His moral character. His strange and obsessive loyalty to doing things the right way, even when the world around him has abandoned all standards. In the months following the fall of Kaifeng, Yue Fei joins various units, fighting wherever he is needed. He serves under different commanders, and each time he stands out, not through politics or networking, which he has no talent for, but through sheer effectiveness. When he is given a task, he completes it. When he fights, he wins. When he leads a small unit, they survive while others die. His reputation begins to spread, quietly at first. That young officer from Henan, soldiers start saying. The one who never runs, the one who actually knows what he's doing. But reputation is not the same as advancement, especially in an army as disorganized as the early Southern Song forces. Yue Fei might have remained a mid-level officer forever, if not for two events: personal tragedy and professional opportunity. The first comes in 1130. His wife, the woman he married before joining the army, abandons him. The details are murky, lost to time and the discretion of later historians, but the basic facts are clear. She leaves him and their two young sons, remarrying someone else. The reasons are not hard to imagine. Yue Fei is constantly at war, constantly absent, providing no stability and precious little income. His prospects seem dim. Why remain tied to a man who will probably die on some nameless battlefield when she could find security elsewhere? For Yue Fei, the betrayal cuts deep. Not because he cannot understand her reasons, but because it represents a kind of weakness he despises. The choice of comfort over duty, of personal safety over commitment. He does not rage or mourn publicly. Instead, he internalizes the pain and transforms it into resolve. If his family has abandoned him, then his soldiers will be his family. If he has no home, then the camps and battlefields will be his home. He remarries later, taking a woman named Lady Li, who proves to be everything his first wife was not: loyal, steadfast, willing to endure hardship. But the damage is done. The softness in Yue Fei, whatever remnant of normal human vulnerability might have survived the fall of Kaifeng, is now gone. He becomes harder, more focused, more dangerous. The professional opportunity comes from the chaos itself. The Southern Song needs capable officers desperately, and Yue Fei's reputation has reached the ears of senior commanders. He is given command of a small force and ordered to suppress bandits and rebels in the south-central regions. This might seem like a minor assignment, but it proves to be Yue Fei's crucible. The bandits he faces are not just simple criminals. Many are former soldiers, deserters from various armies who have turned to raiding because they see no other way to survive. Others are peasants, driven to desperation by the collapse of civil order. They are dangerous, organized, and numerous. Yue Fei approaches the problem with his characteristic intensity. He studies the terrain, learns the patterns of the raids, and begins a systematic campaign to either defeat or absorb these groups. But what makes his campaign different is his treatment of those he defeats. Where other commanders simply execute captured bandits, Yue Fei offers them a choice. Join his army under strict discipline or die. Those who join and then break the rules are executed immediately, with no mercy and no exceptions. But those who genuinely reform are treated as full members of his force, given the same respect and resources as his original soldiers. This approach is radical and risky. Conventional military wisdom says you cannot trust former bandits. They will desert at the first opportunity, steal from their comrades, undermine discipline. But Yue Fei proves the conventional wisdom wrong through sheer force of personality and ironclad standards. He trains his new recruits mercilessly. He drills them until the movements become instinctual. He teaches them eagle claw kung fu, the martial art he learned from Zhou Tong and refined over years of combat. For his officers, he develops something deeper. Training in Jingyi Chuan, an internal martial art that emphasizes mind-body unity and explosive power from stillness. But more than physical training, he instills a code, a set of principles that transform a motley collection of desperate men into something cohesive and powerful, the Yue Family Army. The code is simple but absolute. Freezing to death before breaking formation, starving before plundering. When the army marches through a village, nothing is taken without payment. When they camp in the countryside, they repair any damage they cause. When they pass through fields, they are careful not to trample crops. Soldiers caught stealing are punished immediately and publicly. Officers who abuse their authority are demoted or executed. This might sound like basic military discipline, but in the chaos of the early Southern Song, it is revolutionary. Most armies, whether nominally loyal to the emperor or openly bandit forces, treat the civilian population as resources to be exploited. Rape and looting are considered normal perks of military service. The common people hate and fear soldiers, seeing them as just another kind of bandit. But Yue Fei's army is different. Stories begin to spread. An army that pays for its food, that protects rather than prays, that treats commoners with respect. Wherever the Yue Family Army goes, instead of fleeing in terror, people come out to greet them. They bring information about enemy movements. They volunteer supplies. They send their sons to enlist. Yue Fei's force begins to grow, not just in numbers, though it does grow from a few thousand to tens of thousands. It grows in capability and esprit de corps. The men under his command develop a fierce pride. They are not just soldiers, they are the Yue Family Army. They are something special. And a saying begins to circulate, first among the common people, then among other armies, and finally even among the enemies who face them in battle. It is easier to shake a mountain than to shake the Yue Family Army. By 1133, Yue Fei is 30 years old and has become one of the Southern Song's most important generals. His army now numbers over 20,000 men, and he has been given command of the largest force defending the central Yangtze region. The emperor himself has taken notice, praising Yue Fei's loyalty and effectiveness. But with prominence comes scrutiny, and Yue Fei begins to encounter a problem that will plague him for the rest of his life. He is too successful, too honest, too unbending. In a court riddled with corruption and political intrigue, his very existence is a rebuke to those who profit from chaos. One figure in particular begins to see Yue Fei as a threat: Qin Hui. Qin Hui's story is one of the great mysteries of this era. He was captured during the fall of Kaifeng, taken north with the emperors and thousands of other officials. He spent years in Jin captivity. Then, in 1130, he miraculously returned to the south, claiming to have escaped. The story never quite made sense. How does a high-ranking prisoner simply escape from the Jin? Why would they let him go? But in the confusion of the times, these questions are not pressed too hard. Qin Hui is welcomed back, and his intelligence and administrative skills quickly elevate him to positions of power. By 1131, he is chancellor, one of the most powerful men in the empire. And from the beginning, Qin Hui has a clear position. The southern Song should make peace with the Jin, accepting the loss of the north and focusing on stabilizing what remains. War, he argues, is too expensive, too risky. Better to pay tribute and maintain peace than to fight battles that might be lost. This position is not without logic. The southern Song is still struggling to organize itself. The Jin seem overwhelmingly powerful. Perhaps accommodation is the pragmatic choice. But to Yue Fei, this is surrender disguised as wisdom. The captive emperors are still alive in the north, still suffering humiliation and slavery. The occupied territories are still full of Chinese people living under foreign rule. How can the empire simply accept this? How can it call itself a dynasty, call itself legitimate, if it does not fight to reclaim what was lost? The conflict between Yue Fei and Qin Hui begins quietly, as a disagreement about policy, but it will grow into something deadly, a clash of visions that will determine not just their fates, but the fate of the entire dynasty. In 1134, the Jin and their puppet state of Qi launch a major offensive, trying to push further south and potentially destroy the southern Song entirely. Multiple armies attack simultaneously, probing for weaknesses. The situation is desperate. Yue Fei is ordered to defend Xiangyang, a crucial strategic city on the Han River. If Xiangyang falls, the path to the Yangtze is open, and with it, the heart of what remains of the Song Empire. Yue Fei arrives to find a city in panic. The civilian population is preparing to flee. The garrison is demoralized, expecting to be overwhelmed. But Yue Fei does not accept their despair. He immediately begins fortifying the city, positioning his troops, and sending out scouts to track enemy movements. When the Qi forces arrive, confident of an easy victory, they find something unexpected: an organized defense, well-positioned troops, and a general who seems to welcome the fight. The battle that follows is brutal. The Qi attack the walls repeatedly, and each time, Yue Fei's soldiers throw them back. He rotates his troops so that fresh men are always in the fighting positions. He personally joins the combat when morale needs bolstering, his presence on the walls steadying his soldiers. But Yue Fei does not just defend, he attacks. He sends cavalry units on raids against enemy camps, disrupting their supply lines and keeping them off balance. He uses the terrain to his advantage, luring enemy forces into ambushes. He employs every tactic Zhou Tong taught him, every strategy he learned from Sun Tzu. After weeks of siege, the Qi forces withdraw, badly bloodied. Xiangyang holds, and Yue Fei's reputation takes another leap. But the real prize comes soon after. During one of his raids, Yue Fei's cavalry captures an enemy supply convoy. Among the supplies are hundreds of war horses, precious beyond measure. In the Song dynasty, good cavalry horses are chronically scarce. The empire lacks the pasture lands of the northern steppes, and the best breeding grounds are now under Jin control. Most Song armies have little cavalry, while their Jin enemies field elite mounted warriors. This seizure of horses is a game-changer. Yue Fei immediately begins training an elite cavalry unit, selecting his best and most trusted soldiers. He drills them relentlessly, teaching them to fight from horseback, to maneuver as a unit, to coordinate with infantry. He names them the Bei Wei Cavalry, using a word borrowed from the Tanguts that means protector of the sovereign, but also carries connotations of elite bodyguards. The Bei Wei Cavalry will become legendary. They are armored, carrying both bows for ranged combat and an array of close-quarters weapons, swords, maces, and the fearsome Maza Dao, a long-bladed polearm specifically designed to counter enemy cavalry by targeting the horse's legs. With the Bei Wei as his shock troops, Yue Fei's army becomes truly formidable. He now has the capability to match the Jin on terrain where they have always dominated. He can attack quickly, withdraw when necessary, and exploit openings in enemy formations. The nature of the war is about to change. By 1135, Yue Fei has achieved something remarkable. He has stabilized the southern border of the Song Empire. The Jin and their puppet states have been repeatedly defeated. More importantly, Yue Fei has shown that they can be defeated, that the Jin cavalry is not invincible, that with proper leadership and discipline, Chinese forces can win. But victory creates new tensions. Emperor Gaozong now faces a dilemma. The emperor's father and brother are still captive in the north. Officially, the emperor wants them rescued. But if his father is rescued and returns, what happens to Gaozong's own claim to the throne? The former emperor, even in captivity, remains legitimate. His return could spark a succession crisis. It is an uncomfortable truth that no one speaks aloud, but everyone understands. Gaozong's power depends, at least partly, on his father remaining captive. Total victory against the Jin might threaten his own position. Qin Hui understands this. Perhaps he understands it better than the emperor himself. And so, he begins to argue more forcefully for peace. Not a victorious peace, but an accommodating one. Let the Jin keep the north. Let them keep the emperors. Focus on maintaining what the southern Song still has. Yue Fei, when he hears of these arguments, is appalled. He writes memorials to the court, pleading for continued military action. He argues that the opportunity is now, that the Jin can be pushed back, that with sustained effort, the north can be recovered. His memorials are eloquent and passionate. They are also dangerous. Because what Yue Fei is really saying, whether he realizes it or not, is that Gaozong's personal interests should be subordinated to the national interest. That the emperor should want his father rescued, regardless of the political consequences. It is not an argument that emperors enjoy hearing. Still, for now, Gaozong supports the war effort. The shame of the Jingkang incident is too fresh, the humiliation too deep. The peace faction has influence but not dominance. Yue Fei is allowed to continue his campaigns, to build his army, to prepare for the day when a final, decisive offensive might be possible. That day is coming. Yue Fei can feel it. All he needs is time to prepare, resources to equip his men, and the opportunity to strike. What he does not know is that time is running out, that forces are already moving against him, invisible and patient, that his very success is digging his grave. But first there will be glory. First, there will be one great campaign, one last chance to prove what is possible when righteousness and skill unite against tyranny. The year 1140 is approaching, and with it, Yue Fei's greatest triumph and his ultimate tragedy.
Chapter 4. The Triumph.
The decade between 1130 and 1140 is not one continuous war. There are campaigns, yes, but also periods of uneasy peace, truces that last months or years before collapsing. The Jin are dealing with internal succession issues and rebellions in the territories they have conquered. The southern Song is trying to rebuild its administration and economy. Neither side has the capacity for sustained, all-out war. But the peace is never real. It is simply the exhausted pause between rounds of violence, a chance for both sides to sharpen their blades and gather strength. Yue Fei uses this time well. He continues training his army, refining his tactics, building the infrastructure that will support a major offensive. His headquarters becomes a military academy, where officers from other Song armies come to learn his methods. The Yue Family Army grows in both size and capability, becoming the southern Song's premier fighting force. And all the while, Yue Fei writes. Not poetry, though he is literate enough to compose verses when necessary. He writes reports, tactical analyses, training manuals. He writes memorials to the court, always the same message. Prepare for war. Build strength. Do not waste this opportunity. In the capital, now permanently established at Linan, modern Hangzhou, Qin Hui grows increasingly powerful. He has consolidated his position as chancellor and built a network of supporters who owe their positions to him. He controls much of the civilian bureaucracy, and through it, much of the empire's resources. The conflict between the peace faction and the war faction intensifies. Qin Hui and his allies argue that the Song should accept reality. The north is lost. The Jin are too powerful. Further war will only bring more suffering. Better to negotiate a stable peace, pay tribute if necessary, and focus on prosperity in the south. The war faction, including Yue Fei and several other generals, argues the opposite. The Jin cannot be trusted. Peace without justice is surrender. The captive emperors and millions of occupied subjects deserve better. Moreover, they argue, the Jin are not invincible. They can be defeated. The recent campaigns have proved it. Emperor Gaozong, trapped between these factions, oscillates. Sometimes he speaks boldly about recovering the north. Other times he hints at the wisdom of accommodation. He is not a strong ruler, not a decisive leader. He is a man who wants contradictory things: security for his throne and glory for his dynasty, peace without the appearance of weakness, rescue for his father without the complications his father's return would create. Into this political minefield, the Jin make a decision that will precipitate crisis. They break the current truce and launch a major invasion. In May 1140, Jin forces under the command of Wu Zhu, one of their most capable generals, cross south in a massive, coordinated assault. 4 separate armies attack simultaneously, targeting different regions of the Song frontier. The strategy is to overwhelm the Song defenses, prevent mutual support between different armies, and drive deep into Song territory before organized resistance can form. It is a bold plan, and initially it works. Several Song positions are overrun. Cities fall. Panic spreads through the civilian population. Once again, it seems like the Jin might succeed in destroying the southern Song entirely. Emperor Gaozong issues urgent orders for his generals to respond. The message is clear: hold the line, repel the invasion, do whatever is necessary. This is existential crisis. This is fight or die. Yue Fei receives his orders at his base in Ezhou, in modern Hubei province. He immediately mobilizes his army, organizing a rapid march toward the central plains where the heaviest fighting is occurring. His troops, disciplined and well-trained, move with impressive speed. They are not the confused, panicked levies of 1127. They are professionals, hardened by years of campaigning, confident in their general and themselves. As they march, Yue Fei receives reports about the tactical situation. The Jin forces are numerous, perhaps 100,000 strong, counting all 4 armies. They are led by Wu Zhu personally, which means the Jin are taking this offensive seriously. The Song forces available to oppose them are scattered and uncoordinated, with no overall command structure. It is exactly the kind of chaotic, desperate situation where Yue Fei excels. He does not try to create a unified command. Instead, he focuses on his own army, on doing what he does best: identifying targets, concentrating force, and winning decisive engagements. He sends messages to other Song generals, suggesting coordination, but not demanding it. He knows that in the rigid hierarchy of the Song court, he cannot give orders to his peers, but he can lead by example. By July, the Jin offensive has pushed deep into Song territory. They have suffered some setbacks, particularly in the east, where General Liu Qi has won an impressive defensive victory at Yancheng. But overall, the Jin have the initiative. They control the tempo of the war. Wu Zhu, seeking to knock out the most dangerous Song army before it can be fully mobilized, turns his attention to Yue Fei. Intelligence reports have told him that Yue's force is marching toward Yancheng, near modern Luohe. If Wu Zhu can destroy this army, the Song resistance will collapse. The way to the Yangtze will be open. On July 8th, 1140, the armies meet. The battlefield at Yancheng is relatively open terrain, which should favor the Jin cavalry. Wu Zhu has brought 15,000 horsemen and 100,000 infantry. It is an overwhelming force, and he is confident. Yue Fei has perhaps 20,000 men total and is outnumbered 5 to 1. By any conventional calculation, he should retreat, refuse battle, try to draw the enemy into more favorable terrain. But Yue Fei does not retreat. He positions his army carefully and prepares to fight. He knows something Wu Zhu does not. The Jin cavalry, for all their fearsome reputation, have weaknesses. They excel at shock charges, at breaking infantry formations with the sheer terror of mounted warriors crashing into foot soldiers. But they are less effective against prepared defenders who do not break. And they have never faced anything like the Beiwei cavalry. As the Jin army approaches, Yue Fei deploys his forces. His infantry form the center, arranged in formations that he has drilled endlessly. Shield walls backed by spearmen, with crossbowmen behind providing ranged fire. These are not fancy tactics. They are basic, but executed with a precision and discipline that turns the basic into the deadly. On the flanks, he places the Wei cavalry, concealed by terrain features and ready to counterattack. Wu Zhu, seeing the inferior numbers of Yue's force, orders his cavalry to charge. 15,000 horsemen thunder across the field, a sight that has broken countless armies. The earth shakes with their passage, the air fills with their war cries. But Yue Fei's infantry does not break. The shield wall holds. Spears bristle outward like the quills of a hedgehog. Crossbow bolts hammer into the charging cavalry. Horses stumble and fall. Riders are thrown. The formation holds. And then, as the Jin cavalry is engaged and losing momentum, Yue Fei unleashes the Wei. The Wei cavalry crashes into the Jin flanks in a perfectly coordinated attack. They are not trying to match the Jin in a straightforward cavalry melee. Instead, they employ the Guaizi Ma tactic, a complex maneuver where cavalry charges past the enemy in wave after wave, each pass striking and then withdrawing before enemy counterattacks can form. It is like a series of hammer blows, rather than a sustained push, and it is devastatingly effective. The Jin cavalry, caught between the unyielding infantry formation and the flanking attacks of the Wei, begins to fragment. Discipline breaks down. Units lose cohesion, and when cavalry loses cohesion, when they are no longer moving as organized formations but just individual warriors trying to survive, they become vulnerable. Yue Fei orders his infantry forward. Now his soldiers advance with their maza dao, those long-bladed polearms designed specifically to cripple horses. They target legs and bellies, bringing down mounts and leaving riders helpless on the ground. It is brutal, efficient butchery. By nightfall, the Jin cavalry has withdrawn in disorder. They have lost hundreds dead, hundreds more wounded, and their aura of invincibility has been shattered. Wu Zhu retreats to regroup, and Yue Fei captures over 200 horses and countless weapons. The victory at Yancheng sends shockwaves through both armies. For the Song forces, it proves what many have suspected, but none have dared state. The Jin can be beaten in open battle. For the Jin, it is a warning that they face a genuinely dangerous enemy. But Yue Fei does not rest on his victory. He pursues. 2 weeks later, Wu Zhu attacks again, this time targeting Yingcheng Fu, modern Shucheng. He has learned from Yancheng and has adapted his tactics, bringing up more infantry support for his cavalry and trying to avoid being caught in the kind of coordinated trap Yue Fei set before. But Yue Fei has adapted too. He sends his adopted son, Yue Yun, with the Wei cavalry to reinforce the local commander. The resulting Battle of Yingchang is another Song victory, again using the Guaizi Ma tactic to devastating effect. Wu Zhu's army is scattered, forced to retreat once more. The Central Plains campaign becomes a running battle, with Yue Fei's forces recapturing city after city. Zhengzhou falls back into Song hands. Luoyang is liberated. 10 provinces that had been under Jin or puppet control are reclaimed. The entire strategic situation has been reversed. And through it all, Yue Fei's army continues its strange practice of treating civilians with respect. Where other armies would be looting the recaptured territories, celebrating victory with violence and theft, the Yue Family Army maintains its discipline. They pay for supplies. They help repair war damage. They become liberators, in fact, not just in name. The people of the recovered territories flock to Yue Fei's banner. Intelligence flows to him constantly, where Jin forces are located, which roads they use, which officials were collaborators. A popular uprising begins to spread through the north, as people who had been resigned to occupation suddenly see hope for real liberation. By October 1140, Yue Fei's army has advanced to Juxian town, just 20 kilometers from Kaifeng. The old capital, lost in the nightmare of 1127, is within striking distance. Yue Fei can see its walls from his forward positions. He can almost imagine the moment when his army breaches those gates, when the Song banner flies again over the city that was the heart of their civilization. All the suffering, all the death, all the humiliation could be avenged. "Onward to Huanglongfu," He shouts to his soldiers, naming the Jin capital in distant Manchuria. "We will drink victory wine in the very halls of our enemies." His soldiers roar their approval. The Jin army, which had spoken so contemptuously of Song weakness, now coins a new phrase, one that will echo through history. It is easier to shake a mountain than to shake the Yue Family Army. Everything Yue Fei has fought for, everything he has sacrificed, everything he has built across nearly 2 decades of warfare, has led to this moment. He is at the peak of his power, at the height of his fame. He has won every battle. The path to total victory is clear. All he needs now is the order to advance. The order never comes. Instead, what arrives are messengers from the capital, riding hard. They carry golden medallions, the emperor's personal seal. There are 12 of them in total, arriving over the next 5 days, each one bearing the same command: withdraw immediately, abandon the campaign, return to the capital. The first time Yue Fei receives this order, he cannot believe it. He writes back, explaining the situation, asking for 6 more days to complete the siege. The victory is so close, just one more push. The second medallion arrives the next day. The order is repeated, more firmly. The third arrives the day after that. Yue Fei's officers beg him to disobey. "We are at the gates of the capital," they say. "We can finish this. History will judge the emperor, not us." But Yue Fei shakes his head. "I am a soldier," he says. "I obey orders. If I disobey now, I become a warlord, not a servant of the dynasty. And then everything I have fought for becomes meaningless." By the time the 12th medallion arrives, Yue Fei has no choice. He has delayed as long as he dares, giving civilians time to flee south with his army, avoiding leaving them to Jin reprisals. But he cannot delay longer. He orders the withdrawal. As his army begins its march south, away from Kaifeng, away from victory, Yue Fei stands and watches the northern horizon. Tears stream down his face, unashamed and uncontrolled. 10 years of achievement, he says to his lieutenant, destroyed in a single day. Behind him, the territories he fought so hard to liberate fall silent, and in the distance, Jin forces begin to reoccupy the cities, returning them to foreign rule. The uprising that had begun to spread through the north collapses as the people realize that no rescue is coming after all. The chance for total victory, the opportunity to right the wrongs of 1127, slips away like water through clenched fists. And Yue Fei, loyal to the end, marches south toward his emperor, toward the capital, toward the trap that is waiting. He does not know it yet, but he has just fought his last battle. The victory at Yancheng, which should have crowned his career, has instead sealed his doom. Because in the capital, Qin Hui and Emperor Gaozong have been watching these victories with growing alarm. They have seen Yue Fei become too powerful, too popular, too successful. They have seen what happens when a general wins too much, achieves too much, threatens to upset the careful political balances they have constructed, and they have made a decision. Yue Fei must be stopped, not defeated on the battlefield where he is invincible, but destroyed politically, removed from command, neutralized as a threat, or, if necessary, eliminated entirely. The general who would not kneel to the enemy is about to discover that the most dangerous enemies are not always the ones you meet in battle. Sometimes they are the ones who smile and welcome you home.
Chapter 5.
The Cage.
The army that returns to Lin'an in late 1140 is victorious but bewildered. They have won every engagement, liberated vast territories, and humiliated the Jin forces. By any rational measure, they should be celebrated as heroes. But the mood in the capital is strange, distant. There are no triumph celebrations, no honors publicly bestowed. The returning soldiers sense that something is wrong, but they cannot quite identify what.
Yue Fei senses it too. He is a warrior, not a courtier, but he has learned to read the political currents well enough to survive this long. And what he reads now fills him with dread. The capital is controlled by Qin Hui and the peace faction. The successful campaign against the Jin has embarrassed them, proven their arguments about Jin invincibility to be false. But rather than admitting error, they have doubled down. The official narrative being pushed
is that Yue Fei's victories were lucky, that they overextended Song resources, that they provoked the Jin unnecessarily. More ominously, whispers begin to circulate about Yue Fei's growing power. He commands the largest and most effective army in the empire. His soldiers are personally loyal to him, not to the emperor. He has his own supply networks, his own administrative staff. Isn't this dangerous? Isn't this the pattern that has led to military coups in the past? Yue Fei tries to counter these insinuations. He writes memorials emphasizing his loyalty, his subordination to civilian authority, his commitment to imperial service. He points out that everything he has done was at the emperor's orders, in defense of the empire. But his protests only make him seem more suspicious. The more he insists on his loyalty, the more the peace faction whispers that he protests too much. The more he argues for his accomplishments, the more they frame him as arrogant and self-promoting. It is a trap with no escape. Yue Fei's very competence has become a weapon against him. In November 1140, Emperor Gaozong summons Yue Fei for a private audience. The meeting is held in one of the palace's smaller chambers, away from the main court, with only a handful of advisors present. Qin Hui is among them. The emperor begins with praise. He thanks Yue Fei for his service, acknowledges the recent victories, speaks of his gratitude. But then his tone shifts. "We must think of the empire's long-term stability," Gaozong says carefully. "The war has been costly. The people need peace and recovery, and your success has attracted the attention of jealous men who might see opportunity in further conflict." Yue Fei bows. "Your Majesty, I seek only to serve. If there are those who doubt my loyalty—" "Your loyalty is not in question," Gaozong interrupts. But his eyes flick toward Qin Hui, and Yue Fei understands. The emperor is preparing to throw him to the wolves. "However," Gaozong continues, "for the sake of stability, I am restructuring the military command. You will be promoted to a new position, a position of great honor, as Grand Counselor of Military Affairs. This will give you influence over strategic planning and resource allocation." It sounds like a promotion, but Yue Fei recognizes it for what it is: removal from direct command. A Grand Counselor has prestige and theoretical authority, but no army, no soldiers who follow his orders without question, no capacity for independent action. He is being neutralized. Yue Fei wants to protest. He wants to demand clarity about the emperor's intentions. But he can see Qin Hui watching him, waiting for any sign of insubordination, any excuse to escalate. So instead, he bows deeper. "I serve at your Majesty's pleasure," he says, and hates the words even as he speaks them. "Excellent," Gaozong says, relief evident in his voice. "Your new appointment will be announced tomorrow. In the meantime, General Zhang Jun will assume command of your former forces. I'm sure you will cooperate fully with the transition." The meeting is over. Yue Fei is dismissed. As he walks through the palace corridors, his mind races. He has just been outmaneuvered, separated from his power base. But what can he do? Refuse the emperor's orders? That would be rebellion, the very thing his enemies are trying to paint him as. No, he must accept this. He must continue to demonstrate his loyalty, continue to trust that virtue and service will ultimately be recognized. He has no other choice, not if he wants to remain true to the principles that have guided his entire life. The next months are agony. Yue Fei attends court functions, sits in on strategic meetings, offers advice when asked. But he has no real power. His former army is broken up, its units distributed among other commanders. The Beiwei cavalry, his elite force, is disbanded. The officers who served under him are reassigned or forced to retire. Worst of all, the Jin and Song begin peace negotiations. Qin Hui leads the Song delegation, and the terms he proposes are humiliating. The Song will recognize Jin sovereignty over all the northern territories. They will pay an annual tribute. They will accept the status of a subordinate state. When Yue Fei hears of these terms, he cannot contain himself. He speaks out in court, arguing that such a peace is a betrayal of every soldier who died fighting the Jin, every civilian who suffered under occupation, every principle the dynasty supposedly stands for. His words create a scandal. Speaking against imperial policy in open court is a serious breach of protocol. Qin Hui immediately calls for Yue Fei to be censured for insubordination. Other officials pile on, some from genuine conviction, others from opportunism. Emperor Gaozong looks pained, but does not defend Yue Fei. Instead, He quietly suggests that perhaps the former general should retire from court, take some time away from the capital, reflect on his service. It is another step in the trap. Yue Fei is being isolated, stripped of allies, pushed further and further from the centers of power. But he still does not understand that his life is in danger. He still believes that eventually truth will win out, that the emperor will see through Qin Hui's manipulations. He clings to this belief because the alternative is unthinkable, that the emperor he has served so loyally is complicit in his destruction. In early 1141, the peace treaty is signed. The Treaty of Shaoxing formalizes the division of China. The Jin keep everything north of the Huai River. The Song becomes a tributary state, promising annual payments of gold and silk. Most painfully, the treaty states that the former emperors Huizong and Qinzong will remain in Jin captivity. Their release is not even discussed. The treaty is celebrated by the peace faction as a triumph of diplomacy. Qin Hui is lauded for his skill in negotiation. The war is over, they proclaim. Now the empire can focus on peace and prosperity. But there is a problem. The treaty's legitimacy depends on everyone accepting it, and there are powerful voices, including several prominent generals and officials, who reject it as shameful capitulation. The loudest of these voices, though now forced into retirement, is Yue Fei. As long as Yue Fei lives, as long as he represents an alternative vision of what the Song could be, the treaty remains contested. He is a living reminder of the victories that were possible, of the opportunities that were abandoned. His very existence undermines the peace faction's narrative. Qin Hui understands this, and he makes a decision. Yue Fei must be silenced, permanently. The pretext, when it comes, is almost laughable in its flimsiness. In October 1141, Yue Fei is accused of plotting rebellion. The specific charges are vague: that he had excessive control over military forces, that he had communicated inappropriately with other generals, that he had shown disrespect to the emperor. None of these charges have real evidence. But evidence, it turns out, is not necessary. What is necessary is the appearance of due process, the facade of justice. Yue Fei is arrested in his home and taken to prison in Linan. Along with him, his eldest son Yue Yun and his loyal lieutenant Zhang Xian are also arrested. The charges against them are equally vague: failing to report suspicious activity, complicity in rebellion, insubordination. News of the arrests spreads through the capital like wildfire. Many officials are shocked. Soldiers who served under Yue Fei are outraged. Common people who remember his protection begin to murmur against the emperor. But Qin Hui has prepared well. He has placed his supporters in key positions. He controls the narrative through carefully managed announcements and public proclamations. The message is clear. Yue Fei is a traitor. His loyalty was always false. The emperor, in his wisdom, has prevented a terrible conspiracy. In prison, Yue Fei is tortured. This is standard practice in Song legal proceedings, designed to extract confessions. He is beaten, starved, subjected to stress positions. The goal is to break his will, to make him admit to crimes he did not commit, to provide the confession that will justify his execution. But Yue Fei does not break. For 2 months, the interrogators work on him. They offer him deals. Confess and your family will be spared. Confess and your death will be quick. Confess and your name will not be dishonored. But Yue Fei refuses every offer. He maintains his innocence. He endures. During one session, when officials come to read him the charges once more, Yue Fei tears open his shirt. There, across his back, are the 4 characters tattooed into his flesh: "Serve the country with utmost loyalty." "Look at this," he says, his voice hoarse from screaming. "Look at what I carry on my body." Is this the mark of a traitor? The officials who witness this moment are shaken. Some, it is said, leave the room weeping. The tattoo is undeniable evidence of his dedication, his commitment. How can a man with these words carved into his very flesh be guilty of treason? But Qin Hui is not moved. The evidence does not matter. The truth does not matter. What matters is that Yue Fei must die, must be discredited, must be removed from history as a threat. General Han Shizhong, one of Yue Fei's colleagues and a man of considerable reputation, confronts Qin Hui directly. "What crime has Yue Fei committed?" he demands. "What evidence do you have?" Qin Hui's response becomes one of the most infamous phrases in Chinese history, "mo xu you," which translates roughly as, "perhaps there is," or "it might be," or, most damningly, "it doesn't need to exist." Quote with low words. In other words, evidence is irrelevant. The charge itself is sufficient. If the emperor and his chancellor say Yue Fei is guilty, then he is guilty. Truth is whatever they declare it to be. This phrase, "mo xu you," enters the Chinese language as a proverb, a shorthand for trumped-up charges, for judicial murder, for the kind of corruption that destroys everything it touches. Qin Hui faces a problem, though. After 2 months, he has no confession, he has no evidence, he has nothing except the accusations themselves. And there are still powerful people in the court and the military who are demanding Yue Fei's release, who are questioning the legitimacy of the entire proceeding. He needs to act, and act quickly, before the pressure becomes too great. According to later accounts, the solution comes from Qin Hui's wife, Lady Wang. They are sitting by the eastern window of their home one evening, when a servant brings fresh oranges. Lady Wang looks at the fruit, and an idea forms. "The orange has a thick skin," she says to her husband. "What lies inside cannot be seen from the outside." Qin Hui understands immediately. He takes an orange, carefully peels it, and writes an execution order on a small piece of paper. He places the paper back inside the orange peel, reconstructing the fruit so it appears untouched. This orange is then sent to the judge presiding over Yue Fei's case. The message is clear. Execute them, now, before we have to formally admit we have no evidence. Kill them, before this becomes a public embarrassment. Do it quietly, quickly, and we will all be spared the inconvenience of truth. This plot becomes known as the East Window Plot, and it will haunt Qin Hui's reputation forever. On January 27th, 1142, Yue Fei dies in his prison cell. He is 39 years old. The official cause is recorded as illness, but everyone knows the truth. He was murdered, likely poisoned. Along with him, his son Yue Yun and his lieutenant Jiang Jian also die. Their deaths are framed as the natural consequences of their alleged crimes. There is no public execution, no trial where Yue Fei could speak in his own defense, no dramatic confession or recantation, just silence. 3 men disappearing into the darkness of a prison, and then official announcements that justice has been served. The general who won every battle has lost his final war. The man who could not be defeated by the Jin cavalry has been defeated by an orange and some ink. The reaction to Yue Fei's death is immediate and powerful, though muted by fear. Soldiers who served under him mourn privately, knowing that public grief might draw suspicion. Common people whisper about injustice, but quietly, aware that Qin Hui's network of informers is everywhere. Officials who supported Yue Fei or questioned the peace treaty suddenly find themselves under scrutiny, their careers derailed or ended. The message from the court is clear. Yue Fei was a traitor, and anyone who sympathizes with traitors might be one themselves. Support the peace, accept the treaty, do not question the emperor's wisdom. But beneath the surface, something else is happening. A legend is being born. Stories about Yue Fei begin to circulate, passed from soldier to soldier, from village to village. Stories about his discipline, his honor, his impossible victories. Stories about a man who was too good for the world he lived in, who was destroyed precisely because he would not compromise his principles. In those stories, Yue Fei becomes something more than a general. He becomes a symbol, an ideal, a reproach to every corrupt official and weak emperor. He becomes the answer to a question that every Chinese person knows in their heart. What happens when you serve your country perfectly, when you sacrifice everything for your people, when you never break faith? What is the reward for loyalty? The answer, according to Yue Fei's story, is death, but also immortality. 20 years later, in 1162, Emperor Gaozong abdicates. His successor, Emperor Xiaozong, reviews the old cases from his father's reign, and one case stands out as particularly troubling: the execution of Yue Fei. Emperor Xiaozong orders a formal investigation. He examines the evidence, or rather, the lack of evidence. He reads the trial transcripts, sees the absence of any actual proof. He talks to officials who remember the case, and gradually, the truth becomes clear. Yue Fei was innocent. His execution was a judicial murder, orchestrated by Qin Hui with the complicity of Emperor Gaozong. Everything the peace faction had said about him was lies. In a remarkable act of official contrition, Emperor Xiaozong issues a formal decree. Yue Fei is posthumously pardoned. All charges against him are dropped. His honors are restored. His name is cleared. More than that, he is to be celebrated. A tomb and temple are built for him at Westlake in Hangzhou, near the capital. It becomes a site of pilgrimage, a place where people come to pay respect to the general who was murdered for being too loyal. And in front of that tomb, Emperor Xiaozong orders the creation of iron statues. Qin Hui, his wife Lady Wang, and 2 of their subordinates, all kneeling in eternal disgrace. The statues are positioned so that they forever bow before Yue Fei's tomb, asking forgiveness that will never come. The inscription above the tomb reads, "The green hill is fortunate to be the burial ground of a loyal general. The white iron was innocent to be cast into the statues of traitors." For centuries, visitors to the tomb spit on these statues, curse them, abuse them. It becomes a tradition, a way of expressing the rage that could not be safely expressed in 1142. Qin Hui's name becomes synonymous with treachery in Chinese culture, the ultimate betrayer, the man whose infamy will last as long as Yue Fei's glory. But the restoration of Yue Fei's reputation, as important as it is, comes too late to change history. The Treaty of Shaoxing remains in effect. The Jin keep the north. The captive emperors never return. They die in foreign captivity, their suffering unrelieved. The southern Song becomes a reduced, compromised state, smaller and weaker than what it could have been. And the military option, the possibility that Yue Fei represented, is discredited. Future Song emperors never seriously attempt to recover the north. They accept the division of China, content with their reduced domain. When the Mongols come, a century later, sweeping down from the steppes with an even more powerful army than the Jin ever fielded, the southern Song has lost the martial spirit that might have defended it. The dynasty falls in 1279, and with it, ethnic Han Chinese rule ends for the next 6 centuries. Historians will debate forever what would have happened if Yue Fei had been allowed to complete his campaign in 1140. Could he really have defeated the Jin entirely? Could he have recovered the north? Or would he have overextended and been destroyed? We will never know. What we do know is that the opportunity was never tested, and that Yue Fei's death represented more than just the loss of one general. It represented the triumph of political calculation over military courage, of short-term stability over long-term justice, of fear over hope. Chapter 6. Epilogue. The Immortal General. The story of Yue Fei does not end with his death. In many ways, it only begins there. Over the centuries that follow, his legend grows and evolves. Different dynasties, different political movements, different cultural moments all claim him, reshape him, use him to tell their own stories about loyalty and betrayal, about honor and corruption, about what it means to serve a nation. During the Ming dynasty, which overthrows the Mongols and restores Han Chinese rule in 1368, Yue Fei becomes a symbol of ethnic resistance against foreign occupation. Temples dedicated to him multiply across China. His story is told in operas and novels, each retelling adding new details, new dramatic flourishes. The famous poem Manjiang Hong, often attributed to Yue Fei himself, though modern historians dispute his authorship, becomes a rallying cry for patriots. During the Qing dynasty, ruled by Manchus who are themselves descended from the Jurchen tribes that formed the Jin, Yue Fei's cult is officially discouraged. The Manchu emperors, understandably uncomfortable with celebrating a hero whose defining achievement was killing their ancestors, try to promote other martial figures instead. But they cannot erase him. He is too deeply embedded in Chinese cultural memory. In the modern era, both the nationalists and communists claim Yue Fei during their struggles with Japan. He becomes a symbol of Chinese resistance against foreign aggression, his story invoked to inspire soldiers fighting in World War II. After the communist victory, during the Cultural Revolution, his image is complicated by his loyalty to emperors, but he survives even this ideological storm. By the late 20th century, he is safely rehabilitated, taught in schools as an example of patriotism and duty. Today, over 70 temples dedicated to Yue Fei exist across China, and even in overseas Chinese communities. His tomb at Westlake in Hangzhou remains a major tourist destination, drawing millions of visitors annually. The statues of Qin Hui and his accomplices, though now protected as cultural relics rather than targets for public abuse, still kneel in eternal shame.
But perhaps most interestingly, Yue Fei's legacy extends beyond nationalism and politics into martial arts and military culture. The eagle claw style of kung fu is still practiced, its adherents claiming direct lineage from Yue Fei's teachings. Xing Yichuan, another martial art attributed to him, is studied by thousands. Military academies in modern China still analyze his campaigns, particularly the Battle of Yancheng, as examples of excellent tactical execution. His emphasis on discipline, on treating civilians well, on maintaining moral standards even in the chaos of war. These lessons echo through military theory. The phrase, "easier to shake a mountain than the Yue Family Army," is still used to describe units with exceptional morale and cohesion. But beyond all of this, beyond the temples and the martial arts and the historical analyses, Yue Fei endures because his story asks a question that every generation must answer. What do you owe your country? And more importantly, what does your country owe you? Yue Fei gave everything. He sacrificed his youth, his family, his safety, his life. He never retreated when ordered to advance. He never broke faith with his principles. He served with a purity of purpose that seems almost alien to our cynical age. And what did he receive in return? Betrayal, murder. His emperor, the man he had fought so hard to protect, allowed him to be destroyed by a corrupt chancellor pursuing personal power. The nation he had saved rewarded his loyalty with a prison cell and poison. This is the tragedy at the heart of Yue Fei's story. Not that he died, because all soldiers know death is possible. The tragedy is that he was destroyed by the very thing he served, that his loyalty was weaponized against him, that his virtue became a tool for his execution. And yet, paradoxically, this is also why his story endures, because he proves that loyalty, real loyalty, is not transactional. It does not depend on reciprocity. Yue Fei did not serve Emperor Gaozong because Gaozong deserved it. He served because service itself, loyalty itself, the discipline of subordinating oneself to something larger, these things have value, independent of outcome. He died, yes. He lost, yes. But he was never defeated. Because defeat would have meant compromising, accepting Qin Hui's vision, choosing personal survival over principle. And that he refused to do. There is a moment, recorded in various accounts of his final days, when another prisoner asks Yue Fei if he regrets his choices, if he wishes he had been less honest, less confrontational, more willing to compromise with the peace faction, if he wishes he had disobeyed the order to withdraw from Kaifeng, seized power for himself, become the warlord his enemies accused him of being. Yue Fei's answer, according to these accounts, is simple. I chose to die as a loyal servant rather than live as a traitor. I chose to be remembered as a man rather than survive as something less. If the price of that choice is my death, then I pay it gladly. Whether he actually said these words, or whether they are later additions to his legend, does not matter. They capture the essential truth of his life, that some things matter more than survival, that there are hills worth dying on, that the manner of one's death can give meaning to one's entire existence. In an age of compromise, of moral relativism, of pragmatism elevated to philosophy, Yue Fei stands as a rebuke and a challenge. He asks us, what are you willing to die for? What principles would you refuse to abandon, even if abandoning them would save your life? What does loyalty actually mean? These are not comfortable questions. They expose the ways we rationalize our compromises, justify our flexibility, tell ourselves that survival is the highest virtue. But they are necessary questions. Because without people willing to ask them, willing to live by their answers, civilization itself becomes just a negotiation between predators. Yue Fei was not perfect. The historical record shows a man with flaws. He could be rigid, sometimes politically naive, occasionally prone to the same warrior's pride that afflicted many of his contemporaries. The legend has smoothed these rough edges, creating an idealized figure that may bear only loose resemblance to the actual man who lived and died. But legends exist for a reason. They are how cultures encode their values, their aspirations, their understanding of what matters. The legend of Yue Fei tells us that a civilization that murders its heroes, that rewards loyalty with betrayal, that chooses political expediency over moral courage, is a civilization in decay. The Southern Song dynasty that executed Yue Fei lasted another 137 years before being conquered by the Mongols, but in a real sense it died in 1142. Everything after that was just a slow-motion collapse, a prolonged demonstration that a nation without courage, without honor, without people like Yue Fei willing to stand for something larger than themselves, is already dead. So we return to where we began, that moment in 1140, when Yue Fei stood at the gates of Kaifeng, victory within reach, and received the order to withdraw. That moment when everything he had fought for hung in the balance, and he had to choose between disobedience and duty. He chose duty, and in choosing duty, he walked toward his death. But he also walked toward immortality. Today, 883 years after his execution, Yue Fei's name still resonates. His story still inspires. His example still challenges. The general who would not kneel has become the man no grave can contain. This is his legacy. Not the battles he won, though they were remarkable. Not the territories he reclaimed, though they were vast. His legacy is the question he poses to every person who hears his story. When the world demands you compromise your principles, when survival requires betraying what you believe, when power belongs to the corrupt and the venal, what will you do? Will you kneel? Will you survive by becoming part of the problem? Or will you stand? Will you serve something larger than yourself? Will you choose loyalty over life, honor over comfort, duty over survival? Yue Fei chose to stand, and for that choice he was murdered. But also for that choice, he became immortal. These are not just stories. They are echoes of real men and women who refused to fall. They are the accumulated wisdom of those who came before us, who faced darkness and did not blink, who chose truth when lies were easier, who remained human when the world rewarded monsters. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on your own choices, your own principles, your own willingness to stand for something greater than yourself, then honor that feeling. Share this story. Let it spread. Because legends only live if we keep them alive. We live in an age that desperately needs heroes. Not the perfect, sanitized heroes of corporate storytelling, but real heroes with flaws and fears and doubts who choose righteousness anyway. Heroes like Yue Fei, who prove that defeat can be more honorable than victory, that death can be more meaningful than survival, that one person standing for what is right matters more than 1,000 people kneeling for convenience. Subscribe to this journey. Like this video if it resonated with you. Share it with those who need to hear it. Because the next legend is already waiting to be told. And every legend we preserve, every hero we remember, every story we keep alive, is an act of resistance against the amnesia of evil, the forgetfulness of virtue, the slow erosion of everything that makes us worth saving. Yue Fei's last words, according to some accounts, were simple. The heavens know. The sun knows. Heaven and the sun, the immutable witnesses, the ones that cannot be corrupted or intimidated, the ones that see everything and judge truly. In the end, that is all any of us can hope for, that what we did mattered, that we stood when standing was costly, that we served something larger than ourselves, that heaven and the sun, the eternal witnesses, know the truth even when the corrupt deny it. Yue Fei served his country with utmost loyalty, and for that service his country murdered him. But the story did not end there. It never does. Because loyalty that deep, sacrifice that complete, honor that pure, these things cannot die. They echo forward through time, inspiring others, shaming the corrupt, reminding us all that greatness is possible even in defeat, especially in defeat. The general who would not kneel stands eternal. His story lives, his challenge remains, and every person who hears his tale must answer the same question. When your moment comes, when the choice is between survival and principle, between comfort and courage, between kneeling and standing, what will you choose? Choose well, because the answer you give defines not just your life, but who you are in the eyes of heaven and the sun, the eternal witnesses, the ones that matter.